Hello, my name's Stuart, the Unrepentant Atheist. Good Friday is today. This is a Good Friday edition of my program, and I'm looking at Richard Dawkins' channel, The Poetry of Reality. He's been uploading some interviews that he took part in many, many years ago. This one stretches back, I don't know. I'm not sure on the exact date, but judging by Dawkins' appearance, it looks like at least 10, 15 years ago. He's talking to Richard Holloway, former head of the Church of Scotland, former agnostic head of the Church of Scotland, and he's a professed agnostic. He doesn't hold to supernatural theism, and yet he was head of the Church of Scotland, controversial figure. He no longer is, of course. He lives in Edinburgh, apparently, with his wife. So it goes on for about an hour. I've picked out some interesting moments. They've already spoken, or rather, Dawkins has asked Holloway why is he resisting full-blown atheism, and he's appealing to, well, for example, where does pity come from? Why have human beings got pity? Why have they got appreciation of art, etc., etc.? And Dawkins dealt with that from a perspective of an evolutionary scientist, and I thought that he gave quite plausible explanations as to how these traits in human beings would have survived and why they're present. I thought that he gave quite good answers. So they've moved on now. There's been a lot of preamble, and Dawkins is about to ask an important question. Let's have a listen.
You back, Richard.
Yeah.
But sort of clear the undergrowth a bit before we can talk further. I mean, what do you actually believe about God?
I'm between gods, in a sense. I don't believe in the God outside everything that is, the supernatural originating being. A bit of me, I'm probably not so much an agnostic as an unknower. And incidentally, I mean, one of the criticisms of your book made, for instance, by Anthony Kenny, the philosopher, is that the intelligent position is agnosticism rather than either theism or atheism, because you cannot know for certain either of those, but you can know that you don't know. I would say...
Now, this is a man who has strictly defined atheism as the assertion that no gods exist, no gods could exist. Very strong atheist position. So I hope Dawkins is going to challenge him on that.
That I'm in a state of unknowing about the nature of ultimate reality and whether there is something that either was the agent of it or is somehow embedded within. You see, Spinoza talked about God or nature. It could be that the totality of everything is what some people might mean by this ultimate reality. So I find God talk uncomfortable, partly because it's used in such overconfident ways. And my own hold on Christianity is non-theistic in that sense. And there are quite a lot of non-theistic.
If I may say so, the reason I think he possibly finds talk about God uncomfortable is that he's occupied a Christian position in a Christian setting while not believing in a supernatural God. And Christianity, the religion of Christianity, is centered around this claim that there is an all-powerful supernatural creator, something outside of nature, which is all-powerful and all-knowing. And no wonder he feels uncomfortable, because he's already said he doesn't believe in that. And yet he's been head of the Church of Scotland. He's uncomfortable. And at the same time, he doesn't want to come out and say that he's an atheist, which I think would be the more honest position. And he's straw-manning atheism by claiming that atheism is the assertion, the hardest possible atheism, that no gods exist. He's not acknowledging that there are different brands of atheism. But whatever label you want to put on him, he clearly does not believe in any supernatural God, any personal God, any agent with a mind that had intention for purpose, or anything else of that type. He's referring to Spinoza's God, that God can be said to be the sum total of everything. But then why not just call it the universe and everything that's in it? Calling it God doesn't really add anything to it. And because of the baggage that comes with God, all the supernatural and all the doctrinal God, all the claims that various religions have got to their own God, why taint the totality of existence with the label God?
Religions, and there are non-theistic Christians. There's a non-theistic branch of the Quakers. There's a non-theistic branch of the Unitarians. There are non-theistic Christians kind of sprinkled everywhere. That doesn't necessarily mean to say that they're atheists. They just don't use that rhetoric. But they retain a connection to the community of faith, a bit like Martin Rees, the astronomer royal, who calls himself a practicing but unbelieving Christian. And it seems to me that anyway, the essence of Christianity has always been about act, not about belief. I mean, Jesus himself, I think, was not interested in persuading people to have a piece of metaphysical software, but about getting a certain kind of response. And I continue to be a member of the Christian church because I'm for Jesus. And so are you, because you wrote an essay called Atheist for Jesus. So we have Jesus in common.
Yeah, but Dawkins doesn't call himself a Christian, and he doesn't go to church. That's the critical difference. And he wasn't the head of a major church while not believing in the central claim that there's a God who created everything and that he came down in the form of Jesus Christ to redeem the sins of mankind.
And theologians make a distinction between the Jesus of history and the Christ of faith. The Jesus of history was this extraordinary man who we can talk about that. And you got this.
Yeah, well, the Jesus of history we know hardly anything about. The only thing we know about the Jesus of history is written down in the Gospels, and they're not reliable. If you strip out the Gospels, there's very little left. Okay, there's the writings of Paul, of course, but even so, once the Gospels are gone, there's very little left of any Jesus, historical or otherwise.
Kind of theological development that gradually deified him and made him into a great kind of Byzantine emperor. So my position is eccentric, and since I'm not an evangelical about it, I don't need to persuade anyone else.
His position is more irrational than eccentric, because of his connection with Christianity and calling himself a Christian while not believing in the central tenets. It's completely irrational.
Else to hold it. What I'm interested in is finding out whether you look upon it with contempt and say an intelligent man like me shouldn't retain that.
No. It's very, very far from that. I think we're actually extremely close. First, technically, I'm an agnostic. I made this. I made this 7-point scale.
Yep, and you're 6.
I'm 6.
Yeah.
Where 1 is total confidence in God, and 7 is total confidence in no God, and I'm a 7. Well, maybe a 6.8 or something like that. However,
I'm a 5.5.
Okay.
Why doesn't Dawkins just say, I'm not asserting that no God exists. I don't believe that God exists. I haven't ruled God out, but I can't rule God in because there's insufficient evidence. Why doesn't he put it like that? Because really, Holloway's position is more or less the same.
I qualify that by saying that there's an infinite number of things we have to be agnostic about.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a good comment.
Fairies and angels and things. And so I wouldn't privilege any particular God over fairies or unicorns or anything like that. So I think that pretty much makes me a de facto atheist. Now, when you start using sort of pantheistic language, when you start quoting Spinoza, when you start talking about God as being the same as nature, then I think we have there's no difference between us. I think if you wish to use the word God for that, then I'm with you, except I think it's misleading because the great majority of people mean something very different.
Okay, right. We're going to move on to next part, another clip. Here we go. Okay, so here's Holloway speaking.
But what's wrong with doing that? I mean, why have this animus against a perfectly gentle person like me who's not doing too much damage on earth, why can't you just leave me with my consoling fictions? I mean, why do you want to... what is it that
Richard,
you need
I can't think of anybody to whom I feel less animus than you. Yes, of course. I mean, that's absolutely right. But we're having an intellectual conversation, and
I don't know if you noticed Dawkins' body language, but when he does this, I've read up on body language. When you make this gesture with your fingers, it implies a superior intellectual position. So watch his body language. It's quite interesting.
We could talk about any myth, and it doesn't seem to be that you've got a very strong reason for calling yourself a Christian.
Many don't. I mean,
no.
Yeah.
Yeah, because Holloway's already admitted that the myths in Christianity, the resurrection, the God, the creation story, he's admitted that they're all myths. And Dawkins is baffled as to why he attaches himself to a religion that has these myths. Why bother? Why not just embrace secular humanism?
Do you allow any space for consoling fictions? I mean, I'm thinking, for instance, one of the most astonishing of the Holocaust novels, The Last of the Just by Andrei Schwartz-Bart, about Ernie Levy.
Okay, that's interesting. I'm just going to... that's a good question, yeah. Why not just leave Christians and Muslims to their consoling fictions? I do leave religious people to their consoling fictions. When I go about my everyday life, I'm not going around trying to debunk people. I'm not trying to rob people of things which they find comfortable. And if somebody carries around a lucky charm, neither am I going to say, you realize there's no evidence that lucky charm is actually bringing you any luck. You've got no good reason to believe it. I'm not doing that in my everyday life. And the work that I do online is essentially evaluating what others are saying, have already said on other videos. So I'm not evangelizing and going out and debunking people's religions at all. I am leaving people to their consoling fictions. But in this particular case, Dawkins is actually talking to Holloway, and he's scrutinizing his words and his beliefs. So this thing about, why can't you just leave me to my consoling fictions? Well, because he's presenting his beliefs, and he's presenting himself as somebody that has got these not belief in the myths, but he somehow finds something comforting in Christianity. And why should we not leave him to it? Well, we are leaving him to it, but he is actually engaging in this discussion. So, but I suppose with Dawkins, why did Dawkins write The God Delusion? Well, I suppose because he thought there was a market for it, and that he thought that there was no good justified belief for religion, and that writing the book was a good idea, and it has been a good idea because it's been immensely successful.
The Last of the Just. He's on his way in a boxcar to Auschwitz filled with children, most of them already dead. And he's got a little dead boy on his lap, and his sister's sitting there, and the children gather around him, and they've lost their parents. They're not sure what's happening. And he tells them a consoling fiction. He tells them that they are on their way to Jerusalem and they will be reunited.
Okay, yeah. So Dawkins says I won't go through it. He says he absolutely agrees, and he would have done the same thing. And I would do the same thing too. If I was with an old dying person, a Christian, somebody who believed in the afterlife and everything like that, and I was with a terrified old woman on a hospital bed who was in her last moments, and she looked at me and said, don't tell me that there's no afterlife. Don't tell me that my religion's not true. And I wouldn't tell her that. I wouldn't try and rob her of that comfort in her last moments, because it's not warranted. So it's only when people come to me and say, what do you think of my beliefs? Then I'll tell them. Okay, let's move on to the next clip. Okay, yeah, so Holloway has been talking about myth and how he can find morality in myth. and why it's useful, etc. And Dawkins is going to ask him something in a moment.
That makes us, I think, the most cruel species on the planet.
And well, I agree with that. And coming back to what you were saying earlier, Richard, about the value of myth, and I mean, you've just quoted Genesis. You somehow managed to pick and choose which bits of Genesis you take to be good and which bits you don't. So what is the value of myth if you decide on modern criteria which bits you're going to adopt and which bits you're going to reject as evil?
Because if you're an intelligent human being, that's what you do.
But why bother with the myth at all then? Why not just go straight for the moral?
Well, exactly. Yeah, I mean, I think that's perfectly valid.
Yeah, well, of course he says it's perfectly valid. Of course it's absolutely 100% valid, because people often say, well, there are so many good things in the Bible. You know, Jesus said this, or in the Old Testament, we've got these wisdoms, we've got the Proverbs. And how are you determining that that's good or bad? You're already using an internalized set of moral principles, the difference between right and wrong, to evaluate that. If you've got that internalized already, which you've, probably picked up from your parents and society, why bother with the Bible at all if it's just this hodgepodge of wisdoms and questionable values and rules?
Valid. And I think that the thing about a lot of those old texts is that they are self-correcting, and that you do get challenges within the text.
Yeah, but from what he's saying, he doesn't need the correction, so-called correction that happens in the New Testament when Jesus says, treat others as you would have them treat you, turn the other cheek, etc. He already possesses the moral knowledge to form his own system of morality. He doesn't need, he's demonstrated the fact that he's the master of interpreting the Bible means really that he doesn't need the Bible. He's already got the morality internalized that he's grown up with.
Protects itself against some of those particular readings. And I think you could say that there is a valid, gentle way of understanding that, because I think until a lot of modern farming methods, we did relate.
Okay, so now he's talking about he's not a vegetarian, but he's against factory farming, etc. Okay, let's just move on. Look at one more clip. Okay, so now Holloway is talking about what Christianity means to him.
A way of doing and being rather than holding something. I say to people, to me, Christianity is not a noun, it's a verb. It's not a faith that you can hold and then lose, because I've been accused of losing mine. It's a journey, it's a way of being, it's a way of traveling. And it means discarding a lot of stuff, because constantly you accrue phony ideas, idolatries, hatreds and cruelties. And I think that Christianity is being called upon today to drop, it took 2,000 years to drop its wrong attitudes towards women. And it's...
And 2,000 years to do that, and 1,800 years to drop all the slavery stuff, and to finally come out against slavery. What does that tell you? Why associate yourself with such a religion, with such an ideology at all? Why is it necessary? He's talking about letting go of stuff and letting go of baggage. Well, the final part of baggage is attachment to the religion itself. And all he's doing is defining Christianity the way that he wants it to be rather than how it really is.
Wrestling with its attitudes towards gays. And it seems to me that you're absolutely right that Nietzsche and Jesus just challenged that kind of static thinking.
My question's for Richard Holloway. You described yourself rather splendidly as a Buddhist, Quaker, Anglo-Catholic agnostic.
Okay, so there's a Q&A, and there was one question which I thought was quite good. We're going to look at that just to round off this video.
You don't particularly believe in an afterlife, and you see religion as a product of the human imagination. Well, I'm an atheist, and I could agree with all of that. So I'm just wondering... I'm just wondering in what sense, Richard, you wouldn't say that you're an atheist. I was still really struggling with that a little bit. It seemed to come down to a sort of fairly nebulous sense that, there must be something more than this. And I think a lot of Christians share that. It just seems to me a very flimsy basis for a lifetime of religious observance.
I'm not an atheist because I don't have certainties, and the atheism.
Yeah, well, there we go again with this straw man. I also don't have certainty that there is no God, but yet I'm an atheist. I just don't believe there is a God. He's defined Christianity for himself, how it suits him, and he wants to avoid the atheist label. So now, lo and behold, he's also defined atheism as meaning the 100% certainty that there is no God. Well, that's not what atheism is to me. It is to some people. There's hard atheism, medium atheism, and there's soft atheism. So I think he needs to go and do some research.
Strikes me as a certain position, just as certain kinds of theism. And I mistrust certainties. Certainties crucify people. And I think that the more doubt and love there is in the world, the more human plenitude and good feeling there will be. I'm not trying to universalize my own position. I'm not saying to anyone, be what I am. As when people ask me, because I've been in the Christian ministry for a very long time, I was a bishop, I've studied theology and philosophy, they can't account for where I am.
Now, notice what I was saying about the gestures earlier on, the body language. Dawkins is sitting there like this. I'm surprised he's not saying anything here, because his body language says everything. That he is in a superior, he's in intellectually and maybe even morally a superior position. And although he says that he respects Holloway, etc., a great deal, his body language sort of says something different. The way that he's got his fingers up there in a sort of superior pose tells me that he's got very, very little respect intellectually for Holloway's position.
I just refuse to be categorized and told, therefore you cannot be a Christian. There are people who say that of me. Maybe I'm not a Christian. I'm not particularly interested in the label, but I do still want to be.
Yeah, well, he's interested in labels when it comes to atheism, isn't he? He doesn't want to be an atheist, even though he is an atheist.
A member of that family, because I love much of what it stands for.
Why does he want to be a member of a family when the bulk of Christians do actually believe in a supernatural God? They do believe in the doctrine of original sin, and that Jesus came to save us from our sins, and that if we don't accept Jesus into our hearts and truly repent and believe in God and Jesus Christ, then come the rapture, we will go to eternal death. So why is he standing next to people in church and identify himself with a religion that has that as a central doctrine?
And many of the people and the community to which I belong, I see as part of my family.
Yeah, well, that's it. And this is what we hear time and time again. I did a video yesterday on an MIT intellectual who had turned to Christianity, and a lot of it from what I know about her had to do with community. He's now talking about community and the family, and that's what it's all about. It's the selling point for a lot of religions, and I think he's being really dishonest by mixing with people and identifying with them while disbelieving in their God and effectively their religion as well.
Mad mixture of people, some doubters, some believing things.
Yeah, so he wants the sweetness of Christianity. He wants the community and the feel-good factor. But he's not prepared to accept any of the supernatural nonsense. I just think that he should maybe find another community that he's intellectually in tune with, because he's certainly not in tune with the bulk of Christians.
That I can't. I think it is possible to have an understanding of Christianity that's non-supernatural. I don't want to universalize that. Many of the people I sit beside in the pew do clearly supernaturalize it. I don't, because it seems...
Yeah, not many. The bulk of, like really, I don't know what the percentage would be, but it would be a very, very high percentage. I think he's probably quite a rarity in the pews, not believing in a supernatural God. Okay, thanks a lot. I hope you found that interesting. If you've got any comments, leave them below the video. I'll may even reply to any interesting comments. Thanks. Bye for now.